Chapter 5, Noticing Bias. The first section of this chapter brings about something that I thought was a new revelation, and it's these words. If the Democratic voter could see the way she would have reacted in that counterfactual world, and this is bringing up, making a decision. If the Democratic voter could see the way she would have reacted in that counterfactual world, and compare it to her reaction in the actual world, the influence of her motivations would be obvious to her. Okay? So basically, if you take a theoretical situation and you see it, and you're like, oh yeah, I see, this is the theoretical situation, got it. Yeah, that's what I would do. The influence of her motivations would be obvious to her, right? So it would be obvious if you could see it from an outside point of view. But because she only ever sees one of those worlds, she never realizes that she's being anything less than dispassionate. So, this is something forcing your, this idea of forcing your pick. It comes strongly into, plays a part in a story that I actually, I went over yesterday with my best friend who I watched Japanese things with. He showed me an anime where there was a girl, and the girl was being live broadcasted, but it was against her will, and she was stuck in a coffin, or it seemed to be a coffin, and there were like 80,000 viewers watching her, and the culprit was the gravedigger, so somebody who killed people by burying them alive. And this person, the gravedigger, basically he puts them in a coffin, or what appears to be a coffin, and buries them, and the police try to find them before the victim dies, and everybody is watching. So the whole case is about, obviously, trying to find the person. And time's running out. Everybody's working hard to the core. They're all exhausted. And you see the girl dying. She's getting closer to dying. But no, we're gonna save her. We're gonna, rescue her in time. And it so happens that, the detective figures the case out, and they find that, this girl's in a barrel under a basement, and they're like, okay, we got it. They're opening the barrel, and like the girl's like saying like, oh, she's like, I feel like I'm gonna die, They're like, no, we got this. They open the barrel, and the girl's already dead. She's been dead. Everybody thought it was a live recording, but it was a live recording. Oh, sorry, it was a live recording, not a live broadcast. And they open the barrel, and the girl's already dead. She's already dead. And it's like, sorry, the trick's on you. You thought you were going to save her. You spent all these resources. You did all these things. And you thought you were really going to save her. But this was like the killer giving the ultimate flip the finger, right? F you to the cops, And I had a mixed reaction to this episode, because on the one hand I was like, holy shit, this killer, he's a genius. Like, he really, really messed with them. And the second, obviously, you would imagine is like, oh man, she died, she died, oh my god, like I thought she was going to live, but because you don't see things, you see things in one specific reality, and you don't consider the outside the box or outside the barrel, what's really going on, you miss that. And I feel like anybody who watches that episode, If anybody wants to know what it is, it's I'd Invaded episode 4. 4. Pretty sure. You would realize, like, oh gosh, like, the whole time I made an assumption, and that assumption defeated me. I'm even reading this book right now, and I still made an assumption. Granted, they don't really give you... They make you... Again, it's like forcing your hand. Like, oh yeah, this is how it is? Okay, and you think that you just take it as it is, but you don't really question... You don't question if... Oh, is she really alive? Is this really a live broadcast? So... It's very, very interesting. So anyways, though, there's that. And it reminds me of a scary story that I read. And this scary story, it was one of the most interesting stories. It was the scariest story for me. Because it kind of does the same thing. So basically the story is about, it's the night after prom. And there's a girl and she goes into her car. She starts driving back to her home. And as she's driving back to her home, behind her, she notices there's a big truck that's following her. And every once in a while, the truck will put its headlights on. High beams on. And so the girl starts getting a bit anxious about this. She drives... off course. She goes different places. She notices, regardless of where she's driving, the truck is still following her, right behind her. She keeps driving and driving. She goes off to... Her house is in, like, this kind of, in the rural area. Sorry. Rural area. She starts, she goes up to the off-road. Truck is still following her. Now she's really, really freaking out. She starts speeding up. Truck still is right behind her. And for some reason that she has no idea, this truck is just putting on the high beams on her, like on and off from time to time. She makes it to her house. As soon as she parks, she jumps out of the door and runs into the house. And right before she opens the door to get through the front of the house, she hears the trucker yell, like, "Stay there! Stay there!" And she looks back and this guy, this trucker, has a gun. And it's not pointed at her. It's pointed at the back of her car. And upon inspection, she looks and she sees there is a guy who was kind of just hiding behind the backseat of her car with a knife, with a really sharp knife. And the trucker is there with his pistol, and he says, "Don't move, I've got you." And then it all makes sense. After prom, when she went into her car, there was somebody waiting to kill her with a knife. And every time that the guy rose his hand up to overtake her, that's when the trucker put on his high beams. The trucker wasn't following her because the trucker was after her. The trucker was following after her to save her life. So that was the scariest, to me, that was the scariest story, because it's not the fact that there was somebody after you. Like, okay, you're being chased, whatever. The fact is, the invisible person that's waiting is just there that would have killed her if that trucker wasn't there. See? And it's these kind of stories, when you realize them, you feel like while you're experiencing the situation, it's like your mind is forced into thinking a certain way because maybe it's a high stakes situation, or maybe there's, there's terror involved, or, and that is an easy way to have a lapse in judgment, because your brain is already in fight or flight mode. Your amygdala has been hijacked already. There's no opportunity for you to even think like, oh, why is this trucker, following me? Maybe I should just stop and ask him, because, if I run around, it's not really going to do anything. And, well, might as well, just ask him. I'm in a public place already. I'm in, in the streets of the city. And also for the police force, they had no reason to believe that this person was actually being live broadcasted in front of them. But that's not what their mind was on. Their mind was on, we need to save this person. She's going to die, and people are watching this in a kind of sick kind of voyeurism. Like, we need to, save the day. That's everything that was on their mind, and they were working around the clock. They know they have max maybe 50 hours, to solve the case. So because there was a time crunch, because time was a factor, there was an immediate amygdala hijack, and they didn't spend any second considering the fact that maybe this wasn't the case. Now, regardless if they had considered it or not, I believe that it's still important that they use their resources just in case this person was alive, and that's what happened. But the fact that when they found the corpse and it had already been a few days old, it's kind of like, oh, you were taking it on a ride and you were completely fooled the whole time, So, just like with these two stories, a lot of people, they can't see outside of their reality, and it might be because of a few factors, and the factor that Julia actually brings up in her example in the beginning, it's with the cards. The cards are, you choose it. If you choose the card, you keep it. If you choose the card, you remove it from the deck. So you think you have this illusion of choice, but you really don't. You don't have it, and the person who has the cards, they can manipulate you now, because you are given the illusion of free choice, but you don't have it. And that's what this is all about, breaking through the delusions, And since I'm reading this book, and then I, watched that episode of I'd Invaded, I was like, damn, yeah, I'm still not there yet. This is why I need to read this book. This is why I need to, because a lot of the time people fall into the delusion that they know everything already, and they don't need to read books. Or either here's the other illusion, is that this book is perfect. My job is to, or what I'm trying to do, is actually really look into it and see if Scout Mindset is really all that it's meant to be. If the main purpose of the book is about Scout Mindset, but instead, let's say in the end I agree with it. Okay, whatever. Let's say I don't disagree with it. That'll be more interesting. And I'm trying to find ways to. I'm trying. But I think also you learn more along the journey than just that, because then maybe it's not the fact of Scout Mindset. Maybe it's about the idea of not deluding yourself, or not believing in things that you're more apt to believe, I mean, just this whole idea of like being disillusioned, and how to prevent being disillusioned. That's probably what Scout Mindset is all about, when I really think about it. Having the motivation to not fool yourself, right? And to think critically, and to have motivations that, are geared towards the truth rather than geared towards what you want. Because ultimately, that is what you want. I guess is what the premise is like. It's like, this is what you want. You actually do want to know the truth. And here's the reasons why you want to know the truth. Because A, B, C, and D, right? That's the argument, right? Um, that's what it comes down to, and that's what's going to be contended. I think we can all agree that nobody wants to be disillusioned. Although, I mean, at the same time, there are people who do want to be disillusioned. So, I guess the thing is, if you do want to be disillusioned and you can't really, and there are good reasons, I'm sure, why people would want to be disillusioned. Many reasons, many reasons. Um, so we'll get back to that later, though. Let's move forward. This is just the first section, so you got more to go. Oh, so it seems like in the next section, she's kind of like prepping us up and being like, okay, I want you to take a virtual tour, and I just want to let you know that when you're taking this test, I want you to vividly imagine yourself in this situation. So now I'm being targeted. You know, it's funny. I wonder if in the back of her mind, Julia was like, I know somebody's probably going to try to critique my book, and maybe if this critiquer is going to do that, I'm going to turn the tables on them, and now they're going to be put in the hot spot. So, I don't know. That's just an interesting thought experiment for me. But anyways, though, she mentions that you got to be really vivid. You got to be really vivid, and, you know, don't BS yourself kind of thing. Okay, let's go. And I'm glad that she does that. She's saying, okay, I want you to do thought experiments. She doesn't just leave it at that. She's like, no, put yourself in it. I want you to really imagine this. So let's go down this rabbit hole. All right, first section. So for the double standard test, if I were to put myself in the hot seat for this one, and I guess I have to explain it a little bit, double standard test is basically asking, you know, if the situation was reversed and you were on the other side, would you be thinking the same thing? Right? That's basically it. And I feel like this one's the most basic. We're starting easy, I feel, and it's probably going to progressively get harder. But this one I don't want to spend too much time on because I think we can't all agree. But I believe that it's pretty straightforward. And if I were to put myself in the hot seat, I'll reference something that I talked to my dad about before he passed. Back when Obama was running for presidency against Joe Biden, my dad, you know, you could probably guess and infer, raised Catholic, okay, probably Republican. He was, you know, thinking Joe Biden was, you know, Joe Biden. No. Wrong person. John McCain. There we go. John McCain, you know, he was like, oh, John McCain's great. And I remember I asked him a question. I said, Dad, I know that John McCain is Republican, but honestly, does it really matter? Because what if John McCain was Democratic and Obama was Republican? You know, what does that really... Is that the only reason why you would vote for John McCain is because he's Republican? And my dad paused for a second, and then he said, you know what, son? You know, the truth is that if Obama was Republican, yeah, I probably would be more, you know, apt to choose him. And when I think about it, if Obama does win, that actually, it wouldn't be a bad thing. You know, like, if he wins, then actually, I'd be okay with that. You know, I'd be fine with that. And it was interesting because I brought this thought experiment to my father, and when he said that, I'm glad he said that, because I was like, oh, that's good. He noticed something that he was, you know, kind of biased to, and then he was able to kind of, you know, really rearrange the way that, you know, he thought about it. And I'm sure he was also trying to do it to teach me a lesson as well, you know, and because I was his son and I asked him that question. And it's also a question that I asked myself. So I grew up Catholic. I was, you know, raised Republican. And whenever I would go to school, I would see all my teachers bashing Republicans and Catholics all the time. All the time. Oh, Catholics. Oh my gosh. Wow. Republicans. All my teachers were really, really like fired up. And then I asked myself a question. I was like, wait, are you only pro-Democrat because it's convenient for you? Because I know that, when you're Republican, apparently it benefits the rich more. And when you're Democrat, it benefits you if you're not as rich. So if you're not as rich, wouldn't it make sense that you'd be Democrat? Like, there was so much motivated reasoning that I saw when I was in high school about my teachers, like, going, like, bashing Republicans. And a lot of the students, classmates, kind of, like, had to agree, or kind of like, oh, wow. But for me, I was like, wait, what's going on here exactly? And I was very secretly, silently opposed to them. I was like, well, geez, how can I trust you? Of course it's going to benefit you. Of course you'd be Democrat. Duh. You're going to make more money, or it's going to help you. And then, again, so for me, I feel like it was kind of, I felt like they were greedy. Even though, yes, there is a big disparity between the rich and the poor. I've been reading a book by M.J. DeMarco. He has a lot of interesting history. But I've been kind of using this book to also kind of like judge and pick apart M.J. DeMarco's work. And M.J. DeMarco has a chapter in his book, unscripted, and it says the myths. Let me see, where is it? The myths of the poor, beliefs, biases, and bullshit. So it would be chapter 22nd, the poverty scam. I'm poor because you're rich. I feel like there's so many people who think that just because other people are rich, that's the reason why they're poor, and they don't take responsibility for their situation. And it's never 100% their responsibility. Never. And because of that, and even if it was skewed, where the fact is there's a lot of things going against somebody, the more I feel like it's important to highlight that, you do have some control. You do have some control over your situation, even if it's very little, even if it's minuscule, to reinforce the fact that there is still responsibility involved and you still do have control, because then you'll be finding out ways to escape it rather than to live in a trapped mindset where you believe that you are going to be stuck in a certain place and there's no way around it. So, anyways, motivated reasoning is very important. Challenging the Democrats, but also me being, raised Republican. I also had to challenge my dad. Is John McCain really the best guy to go with? I read an article from Obama before he was even known. This was when he was a senator, and I happened to read a political newspaper, or not, political magazine, randomly, and this was like in the back of my dad's car, randomly. Only political magazine I probably ever read. I didn't even know anything about politics until I was like maybe 16 or 17. Does that make sense? Like, I knew certain things, but I didn't really know it, right? And then I started really understanding, like, oh, okay. But even when I was in high school, I knew enough basics where it was like, wait, why are they pushing for this? Like, this is kind of like, it just seemed very desperate and very needy, and it was very unattractive to me. And they were very compelling, and they were very emotional. But for me, all I saw was like, well, how can I trust your motivations? And if you were rich, would you really be saying the same thing? So that's the way that I look at it. I feel like I've And talking to my friend Sandeep, again, the debates that we had, he was my friend. I told you that was my debate kind of best friend. We always debated all the time until he passed away. Um, that was from middle school. You know, I got to hear everything. I guess, you know what, I did know about politics around middle school, but I didn't even really understand the scope of it until maybe like the beginning of high school. So I'm sorry, maybe not 16, 17. I think maybe 14, 15. Um, and that was completely lost on me because growing up from being a child until that age, like a lot of people knew a lot of things, and I was like, what do you mean Democratic, Republican? What is that? I don't get it. Left wing, right wing, what is that? Um, so the advent occurred when my teachers brought it up a lot, and when I had my debates with my friend. Um, and yeah, it's interesting because it really, especially when you're that old and you realize there's a war between two different political parties, you're like, oh, what's going on? Why is it this way? So, anyways, that's my take on the double standard test. I think it's really, you know, when you look into it, it's very important that you actually consider it. Being separated from it for a long time also helps. I almost want to laugh because I kind of like went to the next page and it said the outsider test. I'm like, wait, that's what I was just talking about. Okay, so reading on. So this kind of goes without question. The outsider test. I laughed when I read the excerpt from the book that she puts down here, and then I reread it again. I was like, wait, what? And then like I laughed when I got it the second time going through. Hopefully, you know, like that doesn't have to happen often. But anyways, though, it's funny because when you're in a situation and you feel like you're pressured, or you feel like you've put a lot of time into something, you know, sometimes the best way to kind of separate yourself from that is to be like, okay, well, what if I was put into this other person's body, and this other person's body, you know, is doing kind of what I'm doing. It might not be the exact same thing, but doing something similar. If I was a new inhabitant in this new body and I knew I was doing this, would I continue doing it? Or from an outsider point of perspective, would I do something different? I think that's super insightful. And the best way that I can kind of like put myself in the hot seat with this, or to even come up with a scenario where something like this has happened, I like to think of, well, first off, I like to think of the idea of you're always really good when you're giving advice to your best friends or people who need help, but sometimes it's hard to do it yourself. You can't follow the advice that you can so freely give other people, you know. It's not always easy to do. It's easy to see somebody else and see what their problems are and be like, here, like, this is what you should do. It's pretty easy. When you're stuck in it yourself, though, you're and you're dealing with pride, you're dealing with other emotions that color your decision making. Sometimes it gets very convoluted and very complex. So it's very interesting. So I've done a thought experiment. I guess, no, this is just me being an interesting writer. So I'm writing a fictional story. I've written a lot with this fictional story. Thousands of pages I've written about this, you know, in the story that I have. It's a private story by me and my writer friend. We've been working on it, and maybe one day it'll go public. So let's see. So anyways, though, for me, one thing that I did was there was a character in my book that I really looked up to, really admired. And I was like, what if, because I have the power to write, and I know this character, and I can write for this character. What if I simulated me kind of like going to this character and asking their advice for my problems? You know, and I did that a couple times. You know, I'll be honest, No shame here. And I was like, let's do this. And this fictional character, um, it's a girl in the. And it's funny because in my story, it's kind of also a self-insert story in a weird way. So, like, in this story, it's me and the valedictorian of our school or whatever. And this is fictional, so this isn't based off of a real girl. Or actually, maybe, no, there are some, like, real life inspirations that I probably got the idea of her from. But what's funny is that I would go back and forth, you know, with this character, and I would solve out issues that I had or decisions that I needed to make. And it always brought about clarity to me. And it was useful, and it would actually change my decision making, how I would do things, how I would, you know, how I would even schedule my day, you know, and there were a lot of big things that I decided that I got clarity from, because in a weird kind of simulation, I kind of like had this outsider's point of view, this character that you separate from yourself. And then everything becomes clear. You can make better judgment calls. You see things from another angle. It's like playing devil's advocate with yourself really, really powerfully, actually, in a way. And with this, you know, I feel like it's always important to play devil's advocate. I always think it's important to challenge your own beliefs. I think it's important to, part of it is probably sport. I love it as a sport, but I think it ends up benefiting you in the end. So the outsider test, you can even use it on yourself, you know, if you have a strong enough imagination. And I think it's great. Any example that I can pull from what I'm talking about, I think a lot of it had to deal with me developing my ideas of success. You know, so for example, with my character, you know, I would discuss at length, like, what does it mean to be successful? And what ended up happening is that I created something, kind of like a blueprint of what I believe to be success. And there were 10 tenets, 10 tenets of things that I realized were of what was the most important things to me. One is my relationship with my spouse. That's number one. Number two is my relationship with my loved ones. So that includes my closest friends and family. Third is my relationship with my body, you know, being physically fit, you know, being, you know, capable, you know. And then fourth was my mind. So there's an integral kind of connection with my mind. So I think that was important. And mind is also the making sure that I stay on top of accumulating new idea, reading books, learning knowledge, stuff like that. So we have body, mind, and then fifth would be my will. So my will is, so it's not just having a great mind, having a great body, but it's about having the will to do things that I may not want to do, or having the willpower to follow through with what I wanted to do. So willpower was the fifth thing that was most important for success for me. Sixth was the meta game, which is learning how to learn. I think that was really important for me. I decided I need to foster that, so I needed to spend time every day learning how to learn, learning new skills that I could develop to learn new skills. So it kind of like, it kind of builds one on top of the other. 7 was PCI-ICP. So it's been a while since I've written it all down. So phenomenal, consistent, intelligent. Consistent wasn't the right word. Incessant. So phenomenal, concentrated, incessant, intelligent, PCIICP, concentrated. Wow, it's been so long. I'm actually forgetting what it was, but basically I know the concept. Man, I can't believe it's been that long since. I need to look that up again. Actually, one moment. Sorry if I rambled earlier, but I found it. So PCIICP stands for Permanent, Consistent, Indefatigable, Intelligent, Concentrated, Phenomenal Speed. So, speed. PCIICP. Speed. So anyway, speed. So yeah. Anyway, so I came up with that concept of, again, I'll repeat it. Permanent, consistent, indefatigable, intelligent, concentrated, phenomenal speed. So that's something that I came up through having that kind of intellectual kind of like conference, I guess you could say, with my character and I, which was a very pivotal moment, because I was like, okay, so I want to test this theory. Does this exist? Can I pull this out? Obviously, eighth thing was my things, my possessions, my finances, all the things that I have. Those were things that I had to take care of. And then 9 was the ability to be all right and to love seeking out problems in the future. So actually looking into the future and then predicting things, predicting problems, and then being able to prepare for them, prepare for problems, and prepare for them, to prepare and to prevent. So there are like 4 different things that start with a P there. So predict, yeah, all those things that I just said, basically. And then 10 was the basically the ability to make my, to make today count, and to continuously carve the stone statue or stone structure that will be my masterpiece, which is this life, like every day. And I came up with these 10 tenets, and it really guided me a lot to my success, to where I am today. And that was, again, from being able to simulate this idea with an outsider, somebody who was not me. Had a heavy impact on how I lived for a while after. Okay, moving on. The conformity test. Wow. Anecdotal stories for the win. I love anecdotal stories. So there's a scene in her memory that Julia brings up where her cousin tricks her, and she's like, hey, you want to listen to all these songs with me? It's like, sure. Oh, by the way, this is my favorite one. Like, oh, and, she really looked up to her cousin, and then her cousin said, what do you think now? She's like, oh, I like the favorite one too that you liked. And she's like, well, that's actually my least favorite song. I just wanted to see if you would copy me. And it's like, it's like sucker punch, and it's like, well, damn it, And it's like, but the thing is that she really convinced herself, like, no, this is the most favorite song, this is the best song. And then when the truth came out, everything changed. The conformity test. I really like these things. It's like, do you say something because somebody else is saying it and you like to ride the wave, and then when somebody says, no, I'm actually not, does it mess things up for you? Do I have any personal experiences with this as well? Did someone ever do that to me? I feel like it should have happened, but I can't recall anything. But the story of like was very very um, easy to imagine, very vivid. So that was really good. It makes me wonder, if I go, like if I talk to somebody of authority, for example, um, let's say my boss, or let's say even talking to maybe one of my students. I have multiple things that I do, but if I go to my boss and he tells me something, am I more apt to believe it, even if he's just seeing what I would respond doing? Um, I feel like I would do that. I feel like if he said like, yeah, I think we should do this, I might, agree, because I'm like, okay, well, you're the boss, and you know what, that sounds like a good idea. But then if he said no, that's actually not the case. That's I just wanted to see if you'd go along with me, but that's a terrible idea. Would you like to know why? I could see myself being caught with that. I can admittedly do that, because I feel like, especially with somebody of higher authority, there's kind of like, you put respect, you give them respect so much that even when they say something that's really bad, or maybe even stupid, that you're apt to reason away all what might be stupid about it, because you have so much respect for someone. So I honestly think that, do we only believe something someone says just because we look up to them? Again, I can think about maybe my dad too. I was um, it's interesting, because when you're growing up and your parents do things for you, you don't really realize what they're doing until you're older, and you're like, oh, this is the lesson they were teaching me. My father, he conformity. I think, there were a few things that, I challenged him with. Oh, well, no. Here's a good one. Here's a great one. I do have great respect for my dad, but he did have an affair. He had an affair with another, woman that was not my mom. Obviously, that's what an affair is. But I remember before, he would say like, "No, I'm not having an affair," and my mom would always be like, "No, you are. There's something fishy going on." And I remember, I would always talk to my mom, and I'd always kind of like reason with her and be like, "No, it's impossible. Dad's not. No, like, the reason why he's out at night, he has to do his, he has to meet up with his friends. Remember, he has his friends he has to meet up with." And I would really, I would really like defend my dad, until the point where my mom, clever as she is extremely clever. I have respect for both of my parents. She put a cassette tape underneath my dad's chair in his car, and lo and behold, he had a phone conversation, and it was empirical evidence, or there's just no denying it now. And now I had to realize, shoot, my dad did have an affair. And I guess there was more motivational reasoning to believe that he wasn't having an affair. Obviously, I looked up to my dad. Obviously, he was, a great teacher, and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean he was perfect. And it doesn't mean that he didn't make stupid decisions, right? And I think that's the test of that, is really like, okay, because you look up to this person, does it mean they're infallible now? Now, are you going to believe every single thing that they say? Are you able to discern what's right, or are you able to have good judgment now? Obviously, if you skew the person or the source of the material, and you believe them to be some super expert or whatever, then you might not even question anything, And for me, especially when I became best friends with my entrepreneurial best friend, there were a lot of things that I had to really question. Just because this person had this much money, does that mean they really were the authority? Does it mean that they really had the best advice? You still had to question that. And is success really all about what they're talking about? Like, they may have, gosh, you know, more degrees than a thermometer, right? But I feel like you still have to. Sometimes that is a disillusionment in itself. That could be a handicap. You feel like you're so good, you know everything. Even being a critic, people can be like, I'm a critic, so I'm infallible because I can point out what other people are missing. For me personally, I don't think that's the case. If you're a critic, you're just as prone. You should be ready to face criticism if you're going to critique people, you know? So, like what I said with the last video or so, like, I started getting critique. I'm like, okay, all right, you know, this is the game that we're playing. Don't blame the player, blame the game, right? That's how it is. So, but you know, in a deeper subject, and this is good because again, putting myself in the hot seat here, I think it's very important to keep this in mind. Definitely, for sure. Doing that conformity test really helps. And here's another thing. I found out that my dad was having an affair. That ended up being for the better. That we all found out, and we were able to reconcile everything before he died. So that's, you know, I can say that even though my dad did die, by the end of his life, there was some reconciliation, and that was due to the fact that, you know, we were able to make amends, you know, and talk about everything and figure things out. So, in this case, yeah, it's important. I've got another story now that I'm thinking about, but let's keep going a little bit further. I'll bring it up if it fits with what's happening next. I'm laughing right now because I just read a part of this section where, like, she does this thought experiment on herself, and she realizes she has to throw away some of her studies, and I think, you know, this was done in comedic kind of fashion, the way that she kind of puts this out there, and I'll put. I have a recording of myself that actually has me read through the book and commenting, like, the full thing. And that full audio, I'm not gonna put out that full audio because you'll hear me reading straight from the book, which I believe you should actually buy yourself. You should not, you know. So this is just commentary, fills or whatever. But anyways, though, like, I just started laughing because it was, I was happy that she did this. I was like, you know what, that's great, that's awesome. You know, it confirms a lot of my suspicions that she really went through this very thoroughly to bulletproof her own argument, because she knows she's going to be biased. So again, it's very meta, because you're talking about a subject where you're not. It's saying don't be biased, but are you biased? Aren't you biased because you're supporting it, right? And that's, I'm pretty sure, something that she's realized. That's what's so tricky about writing a book like this, you know. So mad props for being able to put something out like this in the first place, because it is like the ultimate test of, like, okay, can I really be unbiased? This is something that I'm putting out there, I'm making an argument for, but, you know, I have to fact check myself. So that's why, again, this is why this book is extremely attractive to me, because it's like, well, okay, so you're making a book, and you know it's about not being delusional, and it's about not being biased. So that means if you're going to publish it, and if it's like a tattoo, it's there. Everything is set. You can't kind of take anything back. You know, you better make sure it's really, really, really solid, you know? And that's exactly why I'm doing this deep analysis for this. I've been waiting for this book because I'm like, okay, let's see. You know, let's see what kind of book this is. That's why it's exciting, and that's why I like taking my time with it and kind of like really scrutinizing it as well. But yeah, okay, let's keep going. Okay, so after reading this whole section, it's yeah, no, it's pretty clear. Like you have to. It's almost like the double standard test a little bit, kind of, but it's a little bit more nuanced because there's this idea of cherry picking, right? It's like, do we cherry pick things? Um, the selective skeptic test, and then you have to turn that on its head and be like, okay, well, would you react the same way if it was on the opposite side? Um, and this is when you're sifting through information, you're picking up data, you know, just being aware of that. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Pretty good. Okay, next. The status Q or status quo bias test. Ooh, this one's really good. The status quo bias test. So there's an example about what people think if scientific technology made it so that we could live twice as longer, and people are like, no, we shouldn't live that long. That's not bad. I mean, that's not good. And then if you reverse that, and it's like if you normally lived 170 years, and then you there was some sort of genetic mutation that reduced your life in half, would you still be like, oh yeah, well, I think we should, would you still agree with that? Probably not. And then she says in a kind of cheeky way, now suppose that a genetic mutation reduced the human lifespan to 85 years. This is from 170. Would you be pleased? If not, then maybe you don't really think that shorter lifespans are worth faster societal change. So I read that and I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. I mean, even think of it this way. So 85 years, so what would that be half of? So like 42 and a half, right? So yeah, would I be saying the same thing if I knew I only had a few more years to live? Like not even 10 years left to live, chances are for me I'd be like, no. I mean, like, see, I guess it's more nuanced because if you were born and you knew you only had 45 years to live, I mean, like, see, it's a perspective thing because based on your age already, obviously, people will will change their opinions. But yeah, no, if you were like 6 and they said you think it'd be better, um, interestingly enough, I think people would want more time. There's a lot of people who say they don't, but again, you could probably expose that fallacy if you turn the question around on them. So I think that was well done. Oh, one thing that I do want to add to the status quo test, and I think it's pretty obvious. It's like, do you base your your answer towards the majority of people, or not? If you're contrarian, then of course, obviously not. But that's also, it's something to look forward to kind of like take a good look at and be like, okay, this is what everybody thinks. Well, let's look into that a little bit. So, okay, so in conclusion, the common thought experiments there's 5 that are laid out, and the last part of this chapter talks about how it's not an end all be all kind of thing. These thought experiments don't necessarily always give you, they're not oracles into the truth, but what it does do is that it reveals that your reasoning changes as your motivations change, and that's something that you should be aware of, especially if you want to make sure that whatever reasoning that you're coming to is something good, something really good. So, with that said, I think we'll end this audio video. It was really nice. Got kind of deep into my own history, family history, um, stuff like that. But I think it's important. It's important to really dig deep, you know, and even look inside myself and um, what I've dealt with, and use these examples to really springboard, to really look to things. And it may be uncomfortable, but that's fine with me, because, you know, in the end, sometimes you have to face discomfort in order to find out the truth. And I think that's something that, you know, the author is also doing as well. So with that, everybody have a great day, and until next time.